we're live.
Hi, I'm Bearcroft and welcome to this live demo coming to you from the studios at SAA headquarters. What I'm going to do for you over the next half hour, I guess, is to show you the benefits of using black velour paper with pastels to get a nice dramatic effect. For those of you who've never used black velour before, or indeed if you've never used velour paper at all before, then hopefully you'll find some of these tips and techniques really useful. So to begin with, I've got my little sheet of black velour paper here. I'm going to use a hard white pastel to do the initial sketch, simply because it's a lot softer than, for example, a white pencil or a pastel pencil. I've got my reference photo by the side, which, by the way, is a photograph of the painting I did a few years ago on black velour with pastels. So initially, I'm just going a rather loose outline going with the white pastel, just get the basic shapes in. This is a western lowland gorilla, and the western lowland gorilla, I mean, most gorillas are endangered anyway, but they are an endangered species, and they have this prominent sort of red-brown crest, which, as you'll see towards the end, just adds a little bit of sparkle to the otherwise monochrome, although quite atmospheric picture. By the way, if you have any questions at all about pastels, velour, painting animals, anything that's relevant or even not relevant, then do feel free to fire them and we'll do our best to answer them during the course of this program. So again, just have the basic shapes at the moment, shapes of the nose, things that can be refined later on. We don't need to do a totally comprehensive detailed drawing at this stage. We're after shape, basis of expression and so on. So at this point, of course, you can even make your gorilla smile if you wanted to, but then I like him grumpy. People do say that when you paint portraits, you paint a little bit of yourself into them, so I'm not saying I'm grumpy, I'm just saying, you know, I'm just saying. So here we are, his chin. Maybe make his top of his head a little bit wider. So things like this at this point, you can do a lot of modifications, reworking, resketching. One of the real important things you can have, or the items you can have in your pastel set when working on black velour, is a black pastel. All of these roughing out lines I'm creating with the white pastel at the end can be erased, I suppose you call it erased, disguised with a black pastel at the end. So I'm trying to work out the precise or more precise proportions here bit by bit. And this is how I like to do my sketching. You know, when I'm at home with a sketchbook, I like to just start off with very basic shapes and gradually refine them. I think it actually helps to give more life to your finished artwork that way and less stilted, I suppose. So, almost there. Got a few prominent highlights in. The whole overall effect of this was actually it's a good thing to do if you've got, I say, quite a bad photograph. This was actually photographed, this guy the gorilla, that was another thing. So this gorilla, he was actually photographed when we went to San Diego Zoo, I think it was, many years ago, using a non-digital camera, as we did in those days. And the photograph itself was a little bit blurred. It wasn't the best, but there's something about it that I liked. The pose, I guess, the sort of almost silhouette. So I decided to paint him on black just to show the outline of his face, which was really the only thing you could see. And as it happened, it worked out very, very well. And you know, it's always a good idea if you're painting, say, a black cat or a black dog, a gorilla with black fur in this case, to save you having to paint all that fur, then use black velour or any black surface, black canvas, black paper if you're drawing, anything at all. But consider that, because it will save you a lot of time, and often it can have a much more dramatic effect if you just working on black. He's looking really stern, isn't he? We can maybe make it look a little bit gentle later on. So I'm fairly happy at the moment that things are in the right place, or roughly in the right place. Now some of this pastel at this stage, because it's not too heavy, you can actually rub down, almost hide with the finger. So that's what I'm going to do, just to make sure that I've got an outline as such that I'm reasonably happy with before we continue. Anything else as you carry on through, even a really heavy pastel mark in white, if you're not happy with it, we can use the black as a kind of eraser later on. But things like that are not to be worried about at this stage. We'll try and loosen up. It's a good exercise to loosen up in the sketching, doodling stage, using your fingers a lot. And I find it really helps to get into whatever it is you're drawing or painting. So quite loose. Now, give them a nice bit of rub. Now the advantage, of course, of working on velour, if you've never used this before, is that yes, you can rub it down with your finger. You can almost take that pastel off. It still traces there. But if you rub it like that, fairly gently, just to soften off the pastel that's already there, it won't smudge. Okay, and that is for me, the real plus point about using velour anyway is that it will not smudge. Yeah, everything you put there will stay there if you want it to. As always, when you're using black canvas, black paper, black velour, it will suck in all the colour. It's like the black hole of the art world, I suppose. So you've got to be patient and just build up. I don't want to get those fine white highlights straight away. I want to build up to them and get some nice tonal greys along the way. So I'm fairly happy with what I've got now in terms of the original sketch, or the initial sketch. What I'm going to do now is start to refine the details a little bit by little bit. So what I mean by refining the details is adding some of the wrinkles in, putting a few little bits of hair, and starting to concentrate on the left-hand side, which is where the light is coming from in the first place. I want to get a kind of atmospheric effect of the gorilla, maybe early morning in the rainforest, that kind of thing. And for that kind of effect, that kind of drama and atmosphere, and working on a black surface really does help. For those of you interested in other forms of art, then I'll sometimes call it the Caravaggio effect. Caravaggio, of course, famous for those really dark background paintings with his subjects would be highly lit, almost stage lit, and the huge contrast between subject and background was what made them so dramatic. Okay, so we can now begin to create some form here and there, and talking about the brows at the minute. So the form is different from shape, of course. Form is the almost three-dimensional aspect of an object. In this case, our object is the gorilla. And by using slightly thicker whites on here, we can start to see the roundness of his brow, the heaviness of the brow. And by working in quite a few different tones, i.e. different greys, using just the white pastel, we begin to get more and more form. Because the more tones you have, the more form that you create. A minimum of 3, obviously. If you've got a 3-tone effect, say for example, somebody asks you to draw or paint a ball. I mean, the first thing you do is get the shape. If you get a circle, unless it's a rugby ball, get a circle, then you've got effectively a ball shape. If you want to make it look realistic, round, spherical, then it's got to have form as well. A minimum of 3 tones will give you that. You've got a shadow, a mid-tone and a highlight, and you have a ball that looks spherical rather than just a round circle. So the amount of detail I'm doing at the moment is kind of minimal, but it's just showing where the wrinkles are. It's showing the form of the heavy lips, for example, the brows, and recreating the expression. And then we can also at this point start to highlight some of the things like the hairs under the chin. And I suppose if we're talking about putting a bit of yourself into a portrait, then this part is maybe appropriate. I'm not saying I have totally white hairs in my chin, but they're getting on that way. So a few hairs under the chin, a few little hairs coming off his shoulder at the same time. If you're not that confident about freehand sketching, freehand drawing, white trace down paper works very, very well on black velour, and you can simply use it to trace through your original photograph or a photocopied image of your photograph, and it will rub out with your finger very, very easily. So just be a little bit careful when you're using it. Get your outline on with the trace down and go over it again with the white pastel just to make sure that that is now a more permanent outline rather than a temporary one, just using the trace down. But from that point on, once you start using your pastel on here and you start rubbing it in, forcing the pastel into the fibres to make it stick, you don't need to worry about resting your hand on it or anything like that at all. It all pretty much self-fixing, and it does away with all that horrible smelly fixative or hairspray, whichever is your preference. So again, we can just give that a little rub. This pushes the pastel into the paper, softens the edges, and of course takes the tone down a little bit. But the whole idea is just building up these tones bit by bit. So we're now a more representative drawing of our gorilla. Next stage I want to do is that rather than just being black and white, monochrome, it might look a little bit too flat, too dead. I want to introduce a little bit of colour, just one colour for this one. A sanguine, which will represent his red-brown crest, which the Western London gorillas do have. So they have a little crest of red-brown fur on the top of their head and also going down into the shoulders a little bit. So this is one of the SAA soft pastels, the sanguine one. I've already flattened the side of it so it'll go on nice and evenly. And what I'm going to do is literally just block in an area of colour. I'm going to do probably about 3 layers, light layers, to build the colour up. It's better to do that than just do a single heavy layer which will clog the fibres very quickly, which we don't want to do. If we do 3 light layers instead of 1 heavy layer, it gives us options. It gives us room to add more to make it soft and so on. So here we go. There's our first layer. And I'm also going to go over the edge slightly, because the edge of the outline that I created at the moment is not going to be white, it's going to be a very pale red-brown. So I need to go over that outline to get that pale red-brown. But don't worry, we can get rid of that later on. So here we are. It's going to look like a little bit like a sort of weird native coconut hat or something at the moment, but I quite enjoy doing that bit. I've often thought about leaving it actually and just having that sort of weird coconut leaf hat, whatever it is. There you go, finished. But no, we won't do that. We'll rub it in. Immediately you'll see that a couple of things. First of all, the colour really gets knocked back because that black paper just absorbed it all. But what you are putting down there is now firmly fixed in the paper. It doesn't move your initial white pastel outline, that's still visible, but it's not white anymore in that area. So what I'm going to do is just add 2 more layers, same light layers, and gradually lift the colour a little bit more towards the left-hand side, which is the highlighted side, which is where the sun is shining mostly, the early morning sun coming through the rainforest. So here's our second layer, take it down towards the brow. So more on the left-hand side towards the middle this time, a little bit more on his shoulder, and that also is going to give us a sort of almost a 3-toned red-brown, which gives us that form that we want. So a dark red-brown, mid-toned red-brown, and finally the third layer will be the lightest or more visible red-brown sanguine. So the final layer, just towards the left-hand side, a little bit separating the brows perhaps, and tiniest bit on his shoulder, and then rub that in, same way. So we have not a remarkably different set of red browns, but enough. If you want to add more later on, of course you can do. You can add as much colour as you want to. But for this session, we'll just do the 3. If I think it needs a little bit more towards the end, I'll put some on. So next step is to go back with the white pastel. Maybe use a slightly sharper corner this time. This one is sort of fresh out of the box and got a slightly sharper corner. So we can add a little bit more detail. Working, again, gradually working towards the left-hand side, which is the highlighted side. I can start to add in some more definite fur texture over the red-brown of the crest. And even because we have the red-brown underneath, that makes it a very pale red-brown and not a pure white. So that's the start of this next step. And what we'll do now, we'll continue this after break. We'll take a short little break now and then work out the rest of the detail afterwards.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA, Society for All Artists, is here to inform, encourage and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles, and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing about being a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I could shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.
We've just had a very lovely message from Cindy Williams, who says it's very nice to see you working. She's seen you do a demo before and she loves your art. Well, thank you very much, Cindy. I'm glad you appreciate it. And I hope you're enjoying this little demo as well. Before the break, we just started putting the next level of detail on with the white pastel. I'll continue that now. Next level of detail, of course, includes increasing the highlight strength bit by bit. Remembering we're not going to go for full-blown highlights too early. I want to keep those for the end. But this case, just adding little bits of fur texture and sharpening up some of the wrinkles and so on. Now you may have noticed that I've wandered outside the lines quite a bit on the side of the head. I'm not worried about it at all because I've always got that black pastel in hand, which I'm going to use after this, which will tidy things up quite a lot. So when you're working on black, you've no need to worry about keeping it tidy at all. It's probably, in that sense, probably the easiest surface to work on for kind of getting rid of any stray marks. I was going to say errors, but stray marks that you don't really want. So that's the brow. A few more highlighted wrinkles. Remember, mostly on this left-hand side that the sun is shining on, that's where we're going to start to concentrate the highlights a little bit more. Think about those three tones that create the form. So in the end, we'll have highlight tone on this side, mid-tone towards the right-hand side of that, and then darker tone towards the right of that. And that's going to give us that sort of rounded form that we're looking for. So a few highlighted wrinkles around the nose. Not so much on this side to the right of the eye socket. We just want to keep towards the left mid area. Try and shape his nostril a little bit there. They've got strange nostrils and noses, have apes. Well, they're hairy apes anyway, because we're apes after all, aren't we? So gorillas and chimps have quite strange noses. Okay, so again, without trying to hold yourself back, don't wander too far into the shadow area with these highlights, otherwise you will lose that rounded effect that we're after. So I think one of the key tips really when working on black, especially something like this, is just keep having a check on yourself that you're not doing too much. Hold yourself back. Sometimes less is more. It's very easy to get carried away, and we all do it, but just got to keep taking a little check now and again, maybe squinting at it, check your tones before you do another bit. Maybe just a touch more on his shoulder, a little bit on the ears, especially the parts of the ears that are sticking out around the cartilage, earlobe and so on. Tiny bit more on the brow. Give him a little rub. So at this stage, you can probably see from there that it's all looking a little bit fuzzy around the edge. Now, I've been saying quite a lot about using the black pastel. Black hard pastel again. You'll find that when you're working on black velour, this is probably your most useful pastel of the whole lot, because it will just tidy everything up. For example, I've created quite a lot of red brown in this area where I want it to be more shaded, more dark. If I then just leave a little bit of a hint of the red brown at the top towards the back there, it just gives me that subtle highlight. So you're going to use the flat of the black pastel now, take it up almost to the edge of that red brown that I put down earlier, and you'll just about make out then that kind of very subtle highlight at the top of his head. This is left by the red brown pastel underneath. And remembering, of course, a lot of this is in shade because he's in a deep dark rainforest, early morning, quite dark. So we don't want to see too much apart from the bit where the sun's shining on him. Then we have nice shadow coming down here. Again, it's just covering up that red brown that we put on quite liberally in the first place. Making sure the edge of the ears is a little bit sharper, tidier, all done with a black pastel. Now coming onto this side, again we've got that fuzzied edge where we just threw the sanguine pastel on earlier on, so we can easily tidy that up, just guide the pastel along the edge like that. Like a miracle eraser, isn't it? It's pretty much the same shade of black as the paper, so instantly gone. And of course the important area, this is the important area, the face. This is where we want that kind of sharp definition. I think earlier on we were talking in one of the workshops we've had here at the Open Day about silhouettes in general, profiles. And one of the things we talked about quite briefly was, you know, those wonderful sort of Victorian silhouettes cut out of black card. It was snip, snip, snip like that. And they really worked because they were so precise, precisely edged, precisely cut out, and you know, if the artist was skillful enough, you could tell who they were at a glance. So this is a similar thing that we're trying to do here. We're trying to create a nice, sharp, defined edge with the black pastel, tidying it up so that that profile really jumps out of the page at us. Hopefully the gorilla won't jump out of the page, but you know what I mean. So the profile just literally leaps off the page, figuratively. And the same with the wrinkles. Some of the definition in between the wrinkles has of course been lost, as with the nostrils and creases down the top lip, etc. So we can put that definition back with the black pastel. And again, any little stray bits that are wandered in, we want to get rid of. Now is the time to do it. Tidy the whole thing up before we go on to our final highlights. And give it an overall little bit of rub. Okay, so now we're ready for our final highlights. So back to the white pastel with the sharper corners this time, and all we want to do is literally focus all our attention into this area, the small area around the face, from the brow down to the chin, let's say, because that is the important bit of the whole portrait. So now we can add the final little bits of definition, a combination of detail and highlight will bring that bit out for us. Again, around the brow. This is going to be our final highlight. You can do many, many more layers if you want to on velour. If you're rubbing it in well to push the pastel into the fibres, using the right pastels, you can do 100 layers easy. But you don't have to. You can get a decent effect just with a few layers like this. This is probably the third layer of white, and it will probably be white enough for what we want in terms of our highlights. You can, of course, build up many, many more layers using the white pastel, so you get loads of layers of grey. But this should do us for now. So remembering, of course, to keep it fairly simple. Don't overdo it. Just now look for the final catchy highlights that are going to bring a bit of sparkle to it, and these are pretty much mostly on that left hand outline, maybe coming in about 1/8 of an inch or something like that, just to show that it still has a little bit of rounded form. But we don't want to go any further than that, otherwise you'll lose the whole impact. So these are final highlights, are nice and sharp, nice and vivid, and they're really going to give that final boost. But save them till the end. You know, that's, if you do them too early, they're going to get greyed and dirtied anyway. So save them till the end, and they'll be very, very rewarding. So you pick out that. Even the expression can change with a simple highlight. Just changing the angle of the lip there, the bottom lip, can change the whole thing. And again, have a bit of light shining through his chin hairs. And that's pretty much the detail of the gorilla. And what I want to show you before we finish is a final little technique that I discovered about creating an atmosphere. So in the original painting, we've got a kind of atmosphere of the rainforest early morning. And it'd be nice to have a little bit of that early morning condensation coming from his mouth, from his breathing, or indeed from the cold air rising up, cold moist air rising up through the background. Okay? A couple of ways you can do this. The first way, intuitively for a lot of people, might be to get the pastel and go round and round and round like that. Now I have found personally that creates nothing more than just kind of like a smoke coming out of a steam engine or something like that, too artificial. When you think about mist and condensation, it's much more ethereal than that. It kind of wanders off in different directions. And I found the best way to do it is to take the side of the hard white pastel, start off around the mouth area where a lot of the condensation is coming out, and do a series of little, almost 1-inch squares sort of fading out into the rainforest above. And these squares need to be sort of higgledy-piggledy, so they go in different directions. Now, at the moment, they're just squares. But then the trick is to rub round and round with your fingers, take off that squared edge, and then repeat as many times as you like. I think 3 or 4 layers is probably enough. Gradually, those squares will disappear, but there will be a kind of subliminal movement of that mist, which is much more natural than just going round and round and round with your pastel. It's a sort of haphazard movement, generally going in an upward direction. Find the side that works, that's it. Little squares, different directions. Don't be afraid to add a little bit of pressure as well, round and round with your fingers. And one final little bit towards his mouth, just for added impact, that final breath, or the first breath of the morning, if you like. And blow away any surplus particles. I was going to pick up a black pastel then to sign it, but I think I better do it with a white one. And we'll call that one finished. I hope you've enjoyed that. And again, thank you for your input. And we'll see you again next time. Hi, I'm Bearcroft. I've created my half of the postcard and now I'm going to pass it on to my painting partner.
What have you got for me, Vic? Half a skull. What are you trying to say to me, Vic? Are you calling me an old fossil? Okay, let's see what we can do with it.